Alrighty, what's cracking everybody? My name is Matt, and I wanted to make this video for those of you who are looking for some beginner-friendly books on science or philosophy. I'm making this video essentially to save you both time and money because I started reading philosophy and science books about 5 years ago, and I spent a lot of time and a lot of money on books that I really didn't need to buy and really didn't need to read because some of those books weren't very beginner-friendly, even though they were recommended by other YouTubers and stuff like that. So I essentially wanted to make the video that I wanted to see on YouTube, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to split the video into two sections. The first, I'm going to talk about the introduction to science books, and the second half is going to be about the philosophy books. But this first book that I recommend, or actually I guess the first two books, I would absolutely recommend even if you are just looking to get into philosophy. They are really great books, and so I'll just dive straight into it. So the first book on the list I don't actually have with me, and that is called A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. The reason I don't have it with me is because I actually gave it away because I thought it was such a great book that someone else had to read it. And if that isn't a strong enough endorsement, I don't know what is. Bill Bryson's books are really great. I've actually read another one of his books and started reading a third book of his, and his writing style is really, really great. Like he almost tells like a story, and that's why I'm recommending this book. It's perfect for beginners. Like it tells the story of some of the most famous scientific discoveries, the scientists behind them. It even has like a bit of drama. Like you'll learn about like some of the crazy things that these scientists would do, like stuff that'll keep you like, turning the pages to find out more. And so, yeah, I can't recommend this book enough. It's a great introduction to science, and you should absolutely get it, even if you're just here for the philosophy section. The second book on the list is The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark by Carl Sagan. Now, this book doesn't so much teach you about science in the sense of like, scientific discoveries, like all the famous ones and the scientists behind them and all that sort of stuff. It teaches you about the nature of scientific skepticism, how to apply skepticism appropriately, the nature of evidence, like what would be sufficient evidence to believe in something and stuff like that. So it's essentially like teaching you how to have the mindset of a scientist. Carl Sagan's great. He is a brilliant man. He was an astrophysicist and an astronomer. He made a TV show in the 80s called Cosmos, which was designed to teach the general public like the basics of science and stuff like that. He was just a great man, and this book is very well written. It's very easy to read, and it has one of my favorite chapters of any book of all time. Look for it if you do get this book. It's called The Dragon in My Garage. It is absolutely brilliant, and you'll see what I mean when you do read this book. Okay, so the next book I'm going to recommend is a bit more specialized. I wanted to throw in a few books that are a bit more specialized. Like if you're interested in science but you have a specific goal in mind, like maybe you're a bit more interested in animals and biology or humans and biology. Maybe you're a bit more interested in physics and cosmology, like you want to learn about the Big Bang. Or maybe you're interested in like psychology and neuroscience, how the brain works and stuff like that. I've got a book for each one of those things, and the first one is called Why Evolution is True by Jerry A. Coyne. This is a great book if you want to learn about evolution. And evolution is essentially the backbone of biology. You can't really do biology if you don't do evolution. So if you're going to study biology, you'll want to brush up on evolution before you dive in. And this book does it great. It's essentially aimed at people who may have grown up in like religious households and stuff like that, who have been taught the wrong things and stuff about evolution and stuff like that. So if you do read this book and you're wondering what he's going on about, sometimes it's probably because he's talking to people like that. But you can absolutely just pick this book up and ignore that sort of stuff and learn some of the basics of evolution. It answers some really great questions. If you have questions like, how does evolution work? Did dinosaurs really descend from birds? What's our own evolutionary history? Or, why does this guy not have a doorknob on his door in the video? You'll get answers to all of those questions except for that last one. So if you want to learn about physics and cosmology, A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. Now this one's, it's a little bit more technical than the rest. Like the other ones you can absolutely read, even if you like failed high school and you didn't do science at all. You can pick those books up and get right into it. This one, it does get a bit tricky sometimes. So even though I'm recommending it, just take your time reading it. Go slow, look up terms you don't understand. it's still a great introduction book to cosmology, and like you'll learn about things like black holes and all that sort of thing. I'm just throwing this in there last minute. Richard Feynman's 6 Easy Pieces is another great book on like physics and cosmology and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's a bit thinner than the other one, but yeah, I'm just adding it in last minute. This is a great book. And if you're really interested in about how the mind works, or how the brain works, sorry, I should say, this book is great. It's called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. Now, I wanted to recommend a book that had like more psychology in it. I couldn't really find any, sorry, but this book's great because it deals with the brain, and that's kind of close to psychology. It's essentially a book on neuroscience, and each chapter is actually a different case study that Oliver Sacks worked on. Oliver Sacks was a neuroscientist. He worked with like many different patients with many different like brain problems and stuff like that. So each chapter tackles a different case study of his, and you'll just be fascinated the whole time. I don't actually think it teaches you that much about neuroscience or, like terms and stuff like that. But if you just want to start learning about it, I just think this is a great book to get you started at least. All right, and last book of the science section, although I'm leaving it to last because it borders on philosophy, The Bonobo and the Atheist by Frans Duval. This is a bit of an odd recommendation probably, but this book holds a very special place in my heart. I actually ordered this book when Frans Duval was still alive, and it arrived 2 days after he died, which it just made reading it like a bit of a different experience. It doesn't teach you so much science or anything like that, but you will learn a lot about animals, and he's essentially trying to tackle the question, can other animals be moral? Like, can other animals like chimpanzees, dogs, like elephants, rats, can they make moral decisions, or are we the only ones? So yeah, it's a great book. I have a few of his other books, and they're as well written as this one. This one is just my favorite though, so I had to recommend it. But anyway, now that that's done, we'll move on to the philosophy section. So the first book I'm going to recommend for philosophy is probably going to seem like a bit of a weird one. It's called Philosophy, A Complete Introduction. It is part of the Teach Yourself series, and I think it's a great book. I think it's the kind of book that I wanted when I was learning philosophy. I think I started with something like The History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling, and that is absolutely, it's a good book, like don't get me wrong, but I'd want to work my way up to that. Whereas this book, it absolutely takes its time explaining like the core basics. It goes through like from the famous philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Saint Anselm, all the way through like, Hume, Kant, to, Wittgenstein and stuff like that. If you don't know who these people are, don't worry. They're all famous philosophers, but you'll know them by the time that you're done reading all the books I'm going to recommend. Another great thing about this book is it has like little questions and answers at the end. It has like little pop quizzes. I think they're like multiple choice questions, which is really great. But it's just good in the sense that you'll start retaining some of the information that you learn while you're reading this book. So I don't know if I've mentioned yet, I live in Australia, and that's why I was able to easily get this book here. It's called Philosophy for AS and A Level by Michael Lacewing. Is that his name? Yeah, cool. I don't know how you're going to go about getting this in another country, though. I could get this because I think it's taught in like high schools and early university in Australia. I don't know if it's the same in other countries and stuff like that. I'm just sort of adding this in, like, this is a replacement for if you can't find a complete introduction to philosophy, the one I recommended before this one. This book tackles epistemology and moral philosophy, but it's essentially split up into 3 parts. And the first part deals with explaining what philosophy even is, like how to read a philosophical text, how to write a philosophical essay. It sort of lays out the bare basics of what arguments are in philosophy, because they're very different to how we use the terms in like real, everyday to day life. But yeah, it's a solid introduction. I like that it starts with epistemology and moral philosophy, because they are probably 2 of the more important fields in philosophy that you would want to start to understand. And there is a sequel book to this too. It's pretty much the same thing, but instead it says Metaphysics of God and Metaphysics of Mind. So if you're interested in that as well, after you read this one, you can pick that one up. It's actually pretty good too. All right, on to Think by Simon Blackburn. This is a bit more like the Bill Bryson book is for the science section. This one is great. Simon Blackburn writes in a really, really understandable way, and he makes it sort of fun to learn philosophy in this book. And this deals with the sort of things that the previous book doesn't deal with. Like, the previous book was just dealing with epistemology and moral philosophy, which are really important, but you're missing out on some other integral things in philosophy, like, free will, God, consciousness, like things like that. And so this book tackles all those kinds of things as well. Great little book. It literally is a very little book. Like, I'll compare it to the Bonobo and the Atheist. You can see it's like tiny, but it's a great book. I recommend it. All right, moving on. Plato, 5 Dialogues. This is probably a weird recommendation if you know who Plato is. Yes, he's a famous philosopher. Yes, this is a main philosophical text, and you probably want more introduction books. But this is a really, really easy read. Like, it's essentially just 5 of his short texts put into this one book. And Plato's a really interesting philosopher. He writes in a way that he uses his teacher Socrates as like a fictional character in his little scenarios that he comes up with. So usually it'll go like, the story will start with like Socrates walking around Athens. Then he just sees some guy on the street and he's like, "Hey, buddy, what's justice?" And they'll start answering him and he's like, "You're wrong," and starts debating them and stuff like that. Bit of a prick, Socrates, but I love him. That's what this book is, essentially. It's 5 really short texts. Like, it is a tiny book. There we go. You can probably skip Apology. Like I said, like, Plato uses his teacher Socrates as a fictional character, but Socrates actually really did exist. Well, that's what all the evidence seems to point to. And Apology seems to be written from Plato's memory of Socrates' trial, so it's not as good as the other text, so you could probably skip that one. But yeah, what's great about this book is that you can just pick it up, read just Euthyphro, for example, which is my favorite. You'll have a really, really great time with it. You'll have some interesting questions to ponder after you've read it and stuff like that, and you'll have read your first philosophical text. So the next one is The Stranger by Albert Camus. This is interesting because it's actually a fictional book. It tells the story of a guy called Marceau. I think that's how you say it. I don't really know, to be honest. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce Albert Camus. But yeah, it tells the story of this guy after his mum dies and the weeks following that. Don't worry, I'm not spoiling it. That's like the first line of the book, is that his mum dies. But yeah, it's really great because it gets across an interesting part of philosophy called existentialism or absurdism. It essentially teaches you a little bit about both. But it doesn't teach you it in the conventional way. Like, it doesn't teach you it like a textbook would teach you it. It teaches you it by having you experience it. So in the same way that I would want to, like, if someone asked you what chocolate ice cream was like, you could sit there and try to explain what chocolate ice cream is like. You could say it's like a melted Mars bar, but cold and soft, or you could just give them chocolate ice cream. That's what I'm doing with this book. Instead of explaining existentialism or absurdism, read this book and you'll almost experience it for yourself. And that's why this book's on the list. All right, moving on. The Philosopher's Toolkit by Peter S. Fossel and Julian Baggini. I hope I'm saying that right. This is kind of like a dictionary, really. You'd want to have this book next to you while you're reading other philosophical texts. Like, you don't want to read this book from start to finish. What it essentially is, it compiles all of the key terms that philosophers use. So if you read a book and it says, like, I use the method of induction to come to such and such conclusion, and you're like, what's induction? Bust out this book and it'll have a section on induction and it'll thoroughly explain it in like 2 pages and give examples. And so that's why I recommend this book. Like, just sort of have it next to you while you're reading philosophical texts. I got this book like 2 years after I started reading philosophy, and I wish I had it with me the whole time. It would have made the journey so much easier. All right, now I know this is a video specifically for beginners, like people that know nothing, but I'm going to recommend 2 books that are a bit more tricky. I wanted to recommend this one. It's called Meditations on First Philosophy by René Descartes. You just call it the Meditations, though. That's what everyone else calls it. This is a really famous text in philosophy. If you want to study philosophy, you need to have read this book. It is integral, and it's pretty important in the history of philosophy too. Like, we still talk about Descartes to this day. I say we like I'm a philosopher, but the point is, yeah, people are still talking about what Descartes did in this book. You might have even heard the line, I think, therefore I am. That's from this book, and you'll want to see what he's going on about. Trust me, it's really, really fascinating what he does in this book. All right, and here's the last book. Now, it's a bit more technical. Logic, The Laws of Truth by Nicholas J.J. Smith. Now, this is essentially a logic textbook, and I've actually studied logic. I took a course on it, and the whole course could be basically summed up with this book. Like, I'd say after you read this book, you'll have essentially done a course in logic. It's great. It teaches you propositional and predicate logic. Don't worry if you don't know what those mean. You'll understand when you read this. Yeah, logic is to philosophers what mathematics is to physicists. Like, philosophers kind of need to know logic. You need to at least understand the basics of it because they use it for things like making arguments, which again is a different word than how you would probably think of the word. But yeah, this is a great book. It has like little exercises and stuff for you to do, and it has like, I think he provides a link with the answers to an online website so that you're not tempted to like skip to the back of the book and cheat. But I mean, why would you want to? The whole point is that you're here to learn anyway. So yeah, that's all for this video. Now, this was the first kind of video I've made like this. So if you like it, please hit that like button. Maybe write me a comment. Tell me what I could have done better, or what if you think of any other book recommendations, like chuck them in the comments or anything like that. If you want to subscribe, I'm going to hopefully start making more videos like this because, yeah, I'm hoping this is just the first of many to come. But yeah, thank you very much for watching to the end and have a good one.